I'm Jack from Quilting Dreams, and today we're going to do a version of the July Sew Sampler box. We got the 30's Playtime fabric in the July Sew Sampler box, and I'm pretty excited to give it a go. The table runner, the 5 stars table runner that came with the Sew Sampler box, I don't really use table runners, so I thought I'd give it try something different. So I've created my version of the 5 star. So I've used the woven star, but I've also incorporated a beautiful tulip and some butterflies just to give it a little bit more character. I haven't actually sewn a tulip or a butterfly before, so what I really love about the Sew Sampler boxes is we get an opportunity to do stuff that we haven't, because the quilts aren't huge, but they're just great sizes. So this really gives us a bit of a go at creating something different. So the additional fabric that I used with my quilt, so I used a Riley Blake fabric. This is called Sea Glass. It's a confetti cottons. I've used that in the stems of the tulip, the borders, and that's about, and in the main big butterfly as the middle section. So if you've got a coordinating fabric, that you've got something that you can work with, so that would be great. The other one I used is a Bella Solid. It is M990097. So I used quite a bit of white because, as you'll notice with this one, it goes up into a diamond shape. So there is quite a bit of white in this one, but I really did enjoy getting out of my comfort zone, working with a different type of fabric and just having some fun with it. None of my butterflies are the same, they're all very different, but it just meant that there's more character in my quilt, and it just allowed me then to play with the butterflies and work out what I like and what I think looks really good. And then next time I can pick from any of those butterflies and use them in another quilt. So I'm actually looking forward to recreating the butterflies. I had a lot of fun making them. So let's get started on my version of the July Sew Sampler box quilt with a twist. Okay, so in order to create the tulip block, what you'll need is 6 pieces from your charm pack, the 30's Playtime. So you'll need 6 of those pieces. You'll need a piece of 2.5 by 2.5 of your green for your leaf. You'll also need 2.5 by 2.5 of your background fabric. You'll also then, on top of that, you're going to need another 4 2.5 by 2.5 pieces. That's to help create that tulip flower. We'll then need for the stem, you'll need one at, hold on, what is this? 6.5 by 1.5, and then you'll need 2 at 3 by 2 inch, and you'll need 2 at 2.5 by 2 inch. So that's the fabric that you're going to need. So we're just going to pop some of this aside for now, and we're going to focus on the tulip flower first. So what you'll need to do is just pop your fabric in how you would like it to be. So just putting that fabric out. You might want to swap some around. These here, if you look, I've got all the florals here, and I've got 2 quite heavy fabrics here. So we don't really want those 2 in the same one, but we might look to even that balance out and have, the 2 flowery ones and then 2 of those denser ones there. So what we want to do now is we're going to draw on the background fabric. We're going to go diagonal to diagonal. I'm going to use my Frixion pen. I'll just grab a ruler here, and we're going to go diagonal to diagonal. We're going to do that on 2 pieces. So diagonal to diagonal on that one, and diagonal on this one. Okay, we're going to match that up with our top one, so we want We want them to be so that we have the diagonals with the points in the middles and to the outside. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch on the line. We're going to trim 1/4 inch from that line, and then we'll iron to one side. Now just with this, we're going to be connecting these, so we want to iron one to one side in one direction and one to the other direction. I'm going to go ahead and do that and I'll pop back. Okay, so that's the top pieces made of our tulip. We've got our middle pieces, and now we're just going to work on the bottom of that tulip flower. So with this one here, what we want to do is we're just going to grab a ruler and we're going to mark 1/2 inch in from the edge at the bottom. So we'll make that mark. We're going to pop the ruler from that mark to the corner and pop a line in there. We're just going to repeat that on the other side. We want to make sure we're mirror imaging. So we're going to go in from the bottom and then from the corner to the mark, and that's what we need to do. We're now going to go ahead and stitch on the marked line, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, so we've now stitched on that line. So what we want to do is we're just going to do it on one. We're going to bring that backing across over the side on itself. We're then going to grab our ruler, work out the 2.5 inch on the ruler, and that's perfect. And we're just going to trim that up. And now we have a 2.5 by 2.5 inch block. We're just going to take off that excess and then we'll iron that to one side. So that will go in the middle. That'll go to one side. We'll just repeat that because this one is a little bit different. We'll just finger press that open, pop the ruler on and trim around, lift this piece up, get that 1/4 inch mark on the ruler and trim off the excess. Once we've got that excess off, we'll just pop that into the bin, and we're going to iron those open now. Once I've ironed these open, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sew each of these together, and then I'll sew all of the rows together. So I'm going to come back to you once I've got the tulip finished. Okay, so that should be what your tulip block looks like when we have pieced it all together. So that's looking really quite sweet. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and we're going to make the leaf of the stem, leaf to go with the bottom of the block, the stem I guess. So we're just going to grab the 2.5 by 2.5 inch piece. We're going to place a diagonal to diagonal line across, and we're going to put the right sides together, and we're going to stitch a 1/4 inch either side of the marked line. We'll then trim on the marked line and we're going to iron to one side, and once we've done that we're going to trim it down, but I'll show you that in just a moment. Okay, so you want your block to be 2 inches by 2 inches. So the way that I do that is I use the line that's on the ruler to help me guide. I place that line on my stitch line. I then look to make sure I've got extra on after the 2 inch. Just lining that up, a little bit of pressure, and I trim off the top 2 corners. I then turn it around and again placing it on that marked line and up and up. So then you'll end up with 2 blocks at 2 by 2, and that's what we'll need for our leaves. So our leaves go this way, upside down for you, but that's the way that it goes. And then we're going to get the 2.5 inch pieces, and they're going to go on the top, and then we're going to get the 3 inch pieces and we're going to put them on the bottom. So we're going to piece each of these together now, both of these, and as soon as we've done that we'll pop back. Okay, so you want to make sure that they've trimmed up to 6.5 inches long, and then we're now going to put the middle part of the stem in. So we're going to make sure that our flower petal, the leaves are pointing outwards and up, we don't want to put them that way. We do want to make sure that they're going upwards. If you put them the other way, it's probably not going to matter. I think it'll still look fine anyway. We're going to go right sides together. Now you can choose to pin here, or you can just choose to sew it down. It's only 6.5 inches long, so you could do either on this particular one. I'm going to go ahead and sew both of these on and iron it to one side. So I'm going to iron to the dark side. And then I'll pop back. Okay, so you've got the 2 pieces of your block now. What I would recommend is that you make sure that your block width is 4.5 inches wide at this point. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find the middle of the bottom one. So we'll just mark that. You can just mark that with your fingers and that will get a nice dent on there. So we want to make sure that we have the stitch line marked up, lined up with the middle of the block, and we'll just pop a pin in there. We want to make sure we have a fabric at right angles so that we get a nice straight line and that we don't end up with a wonky block. And I'm just going to pop a pin. These are long pins that I'm using at the moment. Should have grabbed the other ones, I think. So we want to make sure we've got that all lined up, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch from that edge, and then we're just going to iron that one open. So I'll be back in just a moment. Okay, so that is our block finished. I'm just going to grab a ruler, and what we want to do is make sure that this block is 12.5 inches long. So let's just measure that one up here, and we've got that measured, and we're just going to trim off the excess of this one here. Just take that smidgen off there and just turn that around. Match that up with the lines so you get a nice right angle on your cutting board, and then just trim off that little bit of excess from that end. So that's your block at 12.5 inches long by 4.5 inches wide. We're just going to get ready now to do the next block. Okay, so we're going to make block number 2. Now this is the larger butterfly block. You'll need to make one of these. So the butterfly itself is 9.5 by 9.5 inches, and then I've popped that on the diagonal so that it sort of just gives that momentum of flying from the quilt. So you'll need to make one of these blocks, but we're just going to make the 4.5 inch block right now. And yes, it is a little bit fiddly, but it's not too difficult, and I think you know, together we can certainly make it. So let's just pop this one aside and I'll get the pieces ready. Okay, so for block number 2, this is the butterfly block. There are quite a lot of little pieces and it may look a little bit overwhelming to start with, but it's actually pretty simple. It's just straight stitching, trimming off, and then just folding over those edges. So what you'll need to do first is mark up all your pieces. At the start of block 2, I will put all the pieces that you will need for this block and what size they are, so that just to make that a little bit easier. So what we'll need to do is make sure we go from diagonal to diagonal. Let's do one together. So we've got this one here. I'm just going to do it on here, and we're just going to go from diagonal to diagonal, and we're just going to mark that one up, and so that's all marked up. What we'll do is we'll go over to the sewing machine and I'll show you how I do this. But if you've got a designer board, it's a great idea to pop this on a designer board, because you can just go ahead and do all of this sewing now in one hit. And I'm just looking at this and I can see that I have got these around the wrong way. So just make sure you get yours right. Just pop that one in there and pop that one there. There you go. It's when there's lots of pieces it's easy to make mistakes, so just, you know, make sure you check twice and then sew once, otherwise you might find yourself doing some unpicking. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to stitch on all of these lines, and then I'll trim those up, iron them open to one side, and then we'll just keep building this one up. These are quite small, you know, they work out to 4.5 by 4.5, so there's quite a lot of little pieces, but it's definitely one, if we follow along, we'll all be able to do. Let's head to the sewing machine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring the first piece up. I know that these are going in the opposite direction, so I'll just take that one off. Just making sure you've got these at a lovely right angle and placing that under the machine and stitching on that line. And at the end there, just turning that around. Oops, didn't want to do what it needed to. Turning that around and making sure you've got that in that opposite corner and stitching that one across. Now I would, oh, it doesn't want to cut the thread. Now I would go ahead and do all 4 of those, and before you go back and trim off that excess. So what you'll do is sew all 4 of them up, then you're going to trim 1/4 inch from that sew line and then iron to one side. I'd always iron to the dark side, and because we've got the stem, I guess the stem of the butterfly in the middle, there's no intersecting seams, so you'll certainly be okay with just ironing to the dark side. So I'm going to go ahead now and I'm going to sew all of these up, trim them and iron them and pop back. Okay, so you can see here that I've stitched each of these corners on and I've trimmed and ironed to one side. Now just, I'm not sure how I had it laid out earlier, but you want the bigger squares in the middle, not on the outside. I have a feeling I had them on the outside, around the other way, but no, they need to be in the middle, and then the smaller ones on the outside at the top here. So what can we do now? We're just going to pop this small white piece here and just making sure right sides together, and we've got that lovely right angle because that's just going to make it easier to finish up. And we'll do the same to the other side. We'll also pop the top and bottom on the stem piece. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and put the bottom on, and this side I'm just going to iron them to the dark side again, and pop back, and then we can start assembling a butterfly. Okay, so you'll have these side pieces on and the stem in the middle. Make sure you've got the bigger part of your background fabric at the top and not at the bottom. I've definitely done that on one, and it's probably in there and I've left it because I'm not too worried, but if it does, make sure you've got the smaller piece at the bottom. So now we're going to pop these two together, right sides together, making sure we get that nice right angle, and just pop that through the machine. And we're going to repeat that for the other side. Just press that open so you can see what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and repeat that on the other side. I'll iron those open just so that it sits a little bit flatter. And then we're just going to join both sides to our middle piece. So I'm going to come back to you when I've completed all of that. Okay, so that's our butterfly all sewn together, and for some reason it's coming in at the bottom here, and I'm not actually quite sure what that is, but it's not going to change the outcome. So I'm just going to go ahead and use it. So the last thing we want to do is square the block up to 4.5 by 4.5. So I'm just going to place that on, place that directly onto our butterfly, line that up with the center, and just trim off those extra bits. There's nothing to trim down that bottom bit there because it is a little bit smaller, but it's not 1/4 of an inch smaller, so that's fine for us to go ahead and use that. And you'll just see it's just marginally smaller than what we would like it to be, but that's okay. Obviously I prefer it if it's perfect, but it's still going to work. And take that extra bit off there. And that is the butterfly block. I did play around with these, and so this one has a smaller stem, whereas this one has a thicker stem. So it is something that you can play around with. I think it does come down to personal preference and how you like it. But I've probably done all 4 a little bit different just to play around with them, and that's okay. It just gives them all their own little unique personalities. So we're going to go to block number 3 for this quilt. Okay, block number 3 is the woven star, and we're going to use the foundation paper from It's So Emma, which is from the Fat Quarter shop. So we're just going to go ahead and make one. So what we'll do is we just need to take one of the pages out, and we'll pop that aside. The first thing we need to do is cut on the lines that are shown. So it says first trim here, so just cutting directly on those lines. And I'll just move that one apart. And I'm showing you how I do it. This is not necessarily how Kimberly Jolly does it, but I found that this works for me, especially after you've created quite a lot of them. Okay, so we're going to head to the sewing machine, and I'm going to show you how to do one of these, and then we're going to create the woven star. Okay, so the way that I do this, and it's not exactly the same way that they show you in the instructions, so definitely go and have a look at those, but I just found that this works easier for me. So using the bigger triangle, I turn my paper over. I don't use any glue. I just place that in the middle so I can see roughly where that lies, and after you've made so many of them, it just becomes a little bit of a natural habit as to knowing where these pieces all go. I then place this one in that top corner like that, and turn it over and stitch down. Now you want to stitch 1/4 of an inch either side, right side up. So that's your first stitch line. So the fabric is right sides together on the back, and your stitch line is on the front. I then just finger press that open, just like that, and then place my next one on. I know that if you're looking at here, the 3 comes all the way down here. So when I'm placing it on, I line it up, whoops, right sides together, with the bottom of the, I guess, this line that's on the paper. So I pop that there, and again I just turn it over. I don't use any glue, and I sew that one from top to bottom, and then I just open this up, finger press that. Now I know they say not necessarily to use the iron, but I do use just a dry iron on this, just so that I can have that pressed down a little bit flatter. So I'm going to go ahead and create the other 3 up to this same step, and then I'm going to meet you back at the cutting board as soon as I've ironed them, just to press it down a little bit. I do like pressing it down. The other thing that I don't do, and that you will have noticed, is I don't sit here and put my ruler on the lines and get those lines, those marks in. Absolutely go ahead and do that if you like, but I found, you know, you do so many of them that you just start to work out the guide and it just becomes a little like quite natural, and you kind of got that feel on where it goes. But definitely do those markings if that is something that you feel more comfortable with. I'm going to go ahead and get these ones ready so that we can then go on to the next step. Okay, so what you'll have is 4 of these. They'll all be exactly the same. And I just pick any fabric. So what I do is I've cut the entire charm pack, and so what I do is I cut 3 inches from one side, then I cut the two inch pieces, and then of the 2.5 inches that's left, of the 2 inches that's left, I then cut 2.5 in the middle. Then what I do is one lot I have facing up, the other lot I have facing down, and that's how I get this variety of colour through each of those stars. And then as you're making them in bulk, I think I was making about 8 at a time, you can mix and match them. So I think I was, about 8 stars at a time after I'd worked out how to create these. So they are a little bit fiddly and they take a bit of time, but they do turn out just beautifully. So we'll just take 3 of those to the side for now. I'm going to turn that over. Now, as I mentioned before, I don't use mark the ruler lines as it sort of recommends in the instructions. All I do is I just take a bit of a guide here, a bit of a feel, and then make that mark, and you'll see I've actually done that perfectly. So you start to get, you know, a bit of a feel as to what needs to come over, and then just marking that 1/4 of an inch. So placing the 1/4 of an inch on that paper line there, and just trimming off that excess, and then just going to the other side and doing exactly the same thing. So just pull it back a little bit, going in there, and you're lining it up because you know this at the bottom is nice and straight, and then when you flick it over you can see again I've managed to put that directly on that line, and I haven't done those ruler lines. And I think, you know, the first couple was a little bit, you know, wasn't perfect, but as you're doing, you know, 50, 60, 70 of them, it just becomes quite natural to know where that line is, and I don't think you need to mark them. It's just like I don't use glue. I don't need to, but I think if you were going to set them all up before and then go and sew in bulk, you might like to, but I have it all sitting right next to the sewing machine. I just pick it up as I go. Now, the next step we're going to do is back over at the sewing machine, so let's head back and get ready for the next step. Okay, so I have them all done here, so I've now just gone ahead and trimmed them all up. It's really important to do that, otherwise you're going to have a lot of bulk. So I think that that's a really, it's a good step to do. So I'm just going to pop 3 of them aside, and the next step that I do, and the way I just line this up, using that, the line that we've just cut on, I then line the triangle up at right angles to that cut line, and that bottom line, turn it over and trim down. Now, it doesn't matter if you do 4 before 5 or 5 before 4, it's not going to make any difference. Do that one there and just pop that back and finger press that one open, then grabbing the next piece. These are the smaller squares that you'll be cutting. The square that we used first is that bigger square, but it does explain all of that to you in the instructions. And then I just turn it over again, and you can see I haven't used any glue, and the fabric pieces are big enough that you have a lot of leeway when you're doing it, and that's what it should look like at the end of this step. So I'm going to go ahead and finish these 3, and I'm going to meet you back at the cutting table. But before I go to the cutting table, I'm just going to again press this open, not using any steam. Oops, sorry about that. Just using a dry iron, just so that I get a little bit more of a flatter press there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'll meet you back at the cutting table. Okay, so I've gone ahead and completed all 4 of those, and I've just pressed them lightly, not with any steam or anything, just just flatten it out a little bit. So I'm just going to pop 3 of those aside. Now the next step that we want to do is turn that over, having the, I guess, yeah, having it fabric down. Lost my words there. And what we're going to do is we're going to line this up with the line on here. So just the edge line here. So we've got the first trim line, and we're now going to line it up with that solid line and trim that one up. And we're going to do that again on the other side here. Now what you'll need to do is go ahead and do that on all of your pieces, and I don't trim off this bottom line at this stage. I leave that exactly how it is. I'm not exactly sure what the instructions say, but I don't feel that I need to trim that up at this stage. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll do the other 3 of these, and I'll meet you back at the sewing machine for the next step. Okay, so we have all 4 pieces cut and ready to go. Now, again, I haven't exactly followed the instructions again, but I get 2 of the pieces, I go right sides together, and because I haven't trimmed this bottom, I know that that's a nice straight line. I pop that onto the board here, and I line that up. I then just finger hold it in place, a little bit of pressure, and make sure I have these matched up. And then just go ahead and trim and sew that on the dotted line. And I just go from one end to the other end, and if I turn it over, you can see that's sewn directly on the other side. So I haven't put the pin in, so there's a spot on here, right here, that you can, oops, let me show you a little bit better, that you can put a pin in to line it up. I haven't done that. We'll go ahead and do that on the other one. Just pop those together again, just popping them using the board, the extension board here, line that up. Just want to make sure that's all lined up, and let's pop that one under. Oops. Oh, my thread has come loose. Let me just fix that up. Okay, I've fixed up my thread there. It just came out for the moment, and I've now sewn up the other one. So what I do at this point is I just open it up and just finger press this open so that it's like that. Just finger press it open. And I do that with the other one. Whoops. Finger press that open. And then there are dots on here that you can match up as well. But again, I don't do that. I just simply match up this middle part. Just with my, you know, eyeball that. Match that up so that it's nice in the middle there. Put that all together. And sew along. Just making sure that is matched up at the other end, keeping that open. And going to the other end. Now you can definitely put those pins in, but you'll see this is slightly off on that one there, but it's not going to make a lot of difference. And I don't think it's enough for me to pin, and I think because they're so you know, there's a lot of character in these woven styles, that if it's out by a little bit, it's not something I'm going to worry about. So you can see there, I'm out by a tiny bit, but I'm not going to worry about that. I think that it's perfect as it is. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove, so you can do one of 2 ways. You can go back to your mat and you can trim off these excess, but what I do, I don't do that. I'll remove all of my paper, iron it down flat, and then I will square it up at 4.5 inch block. I find that that's the easiest way for me, and I'm very happy to do it that way. I actually didn't read the instructions for this part, but I just found that I was more comfortable doing it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'll meet you back and I'll show you the finished block. Okay, so what you'll see here is that we have taken all that paper off, so I've just ripped it all out. Look, what I did is I would make them, put them all aside. If I got a phone call or one of the kids came in, I would just start peeling the backs of the paper off the back. I didn't, it probably wasn't my favourite task, but it certainly is one that needed to be done. So with this, what I'll do is trim this down. Now using this line on my ruler, I'll line that up with this sew line from top to bottom here and putting that circle right in the middle. So just lining that up. Then I just go ahead, so you can see here there's quite a lot of excess that you get to play with. And if you actually, like if I look around, I can see that these points are all sitting at that 1/4 inch line that surrounds this ruler. Sorry, I just moved that a little bit. And I just pop a little bit of pressure on there and go ahead and do the one side and then the top side. If you've got one of the Lazy Susan, you just turn that around now and pop your ruler on again from diagonal to diagonal. I make sure I line it up with that seam, that sew line, and in the middle, tiny little bit of pressure, and then trim off both edges. And this is the block that you will have left. How beautiful is that? I really do like these woven stars. They're just a little bit fiddly, but they turn out just beautifully. So the foundation paper is absolutely fantastic. I love It's So Emma that they've come up with this. I think this block is just stunning. It's just a little bit fiddly, but I think it's absolutely worth the time. And it's amazing once you get into a bit of a rhythm how quickly you can create those woven stars. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how I piece one of the rows together. So we're going to go ahead and get ready for that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do this row here. So we have one of our woven stars and we have the butterfly that we made. So these are the two that we've just made. And what we'll need in the middle of that is, this is a 3.5 by 4.5 inch square. And we're going to go ahead and attach that there to both, to the butterfly and the woven star. So you can certainly, because these are fairly small blocks, you can go ahead, I'm just going to put these around the right way in accordance to my mud map that I did. You can go ahead and just do this without pinning, because they're very small and it's quite easy just to line it up from end to end. Pop that on. I try to have the seams underneath, so where I've got a flat surface I'll pop that on the top and put the seams underneath, and then sew that one and add the other one on. So I'm going to go ahead and put these two together, and then we'll put the expanded section out to one side, because we're actually going to integrate this one, whoops, around this way. We're going to integrate this one on the left hand side of this, just to give it a little bit more dimension. So let's go ahead and we'll get these together first. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've cut one 18.5 by 4.5 inch strip, and I'm going to attach that to this side of the woven star, so right sides together. And again, you don't have to pin, just make sure you've got it at that right angle, having the side with the least amount of seams on top, because that'll help to keep that nice even stitch as you progress through. If you do it the other way, sometimes it can go a bit short or a bit longer. In that case, if you like to do it the other way, make sure you pin, because you want to get this as accurate as possible. So I'm going to go ahead, stitch this 1/4 inch from this edge, and then I'm going to iron to one side, and then I'm going to come back when I'm ready to add the additional butterfly into the left hand side of the quilt. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've pieced these 4 rows together, because the 4 rows equal, they equal the butterfly, so that will allow us to pop this butterfly in, and then I've got one extra piece here to put on the other side so we can get our 48-inch width. So with that in mind, we're just going to go right sides together. Sorry, so one thing I did do is I worked out where this was. So there is an extra piece here and here to get this to the 32. So in total, with these all calculated, you want 32 inches from, you know, edge to edge here before we add on this butterfly. So what I'm going to do is right sides together. Now we are starting to get to bigger pieces here, so I'm just going to make sure we've got that at a nice right angle. Pop a pin in there, and the same at the other end, making sure we've got that lovely right angle so we know that that's going to sit beautifully when we have it finished. Pop pin in that one and one in the middle. You don't need to do any more than that because it's not super wide. I'm going to go ahead, sew this one on and sew an extra piece on, and then what we want to make sure is that the length at the end of that is 48 inches. So I'll come back to you once I've sewn both pieces on, and we can have a look at what that looks like before we go to the next step. Okay, so I have now pieced the quilt rows together. Well, not all of it yet, so let's just have a look. So we've got the tulips down the bottom, then we go through and we have those woven stars and our butterflies, and so that's looking beautiful and quite cute. I love how the butterflies have turned out. I've never made the butterflies before, and I don't have a pattern, so I just created it from scratch, and you know, I've changed each one of it as I've progressed along, and I think that's what gives it a little bit more character. And then we have the top of our quilt with the nice big butterfly on the side here and those butterflies there. So what we want to do now is join our bottom section and our top section together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm also going to put on a border. The border is going to be a 3-inch border, 3-inch border, 2.5-inch finished. And I'm going to do that in this green here that I've used here, and that I've also used down here in the tulip stems. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pop a border on with that. Then I'm going to quilt it, and when I finish quilting it, I'm going to come back and show you what the finished quilt looks like. I'm super excited to see how this turns out. Like I said, you know, with all of the sew samplers, I like to test myself. I like to use what they've got in the box, and sometimes I'll do the pattern and sometimes I'll do something a little bit different, and this one is definitely very different, but it allowed me to practice on some blocks that I have not done before. But so, you know, I really like to be able to do that on quilts like these, which are not big, but they give me ideas on how I can progress my quilting. So let me go ahead and get all of this done, and I'm going to come back and show you the finished product. And just like that, we have completed my July Sew Sampler Box quilt. As I mentioned, they did the table runner and I created a quilt. My quilt measures at 52 by 62, so it's a lovely size quilt. It's great as a lap quilt, especially when I'm working. I find that having a quilt over my knees is just amazing. It keeps me nice and warm throughout the day while I'm sitting in lots of meetings. So, you know, I hope you enjoyed creating this quilt with me. I plan on bringing other quilt tutorials to you, and if you like them, great, come join me again, and let's keep crafting together. So until next time, keep crafting and have a lovely day. Bye for now.